There's a kind of quiet that only arrives after 70, not the silence of an empty room, but the silence inside your body when the world stops asking so much of it. And yet, in that quiet, a new voice begins to speak, software but insistent. It doesn't ask what you've done, it asks what you still remember. They say aging is a blessing, but they forget to tell you that blessings sometimes come wrapped in things you never asked for. Slower mornings, names that slip through your fingers. A body that once answered instantly now negotiates each movement with care. No one prepares you for how invisible you might begin to feel, or how deeply you'll crave not youth, but recognition. Still, there are truths that only reveal themselves when you've lived long enough to stop rushing. And if you're here, reading, breathing, you're ready to hear them. 1. The slowness is not a weakness. There was a time when Margaret could tie her shoes while standing. Now, she sits on the edge of the bed, lifts one foot, pauses to breathe, then the other. She used to rush through this. Coffee on, bag packed, keys forgotten, found again. But now, everything asks for a little more stillness. At first, she resented it, that slowness. She thought it meant she was falling behind, becoming someone who needed catching up. But one morning, in the soft light just before sunrise, she noticed something. The slowness wasn't the enemy, it was a doorway, to feel her feet press into the floor, to hear the breath before it left her chest, to witness, instead of chase, the day. Aging didn't steal her speed, it gifted her a different rhythm, one that doesn't demand, but invites. And with that rhythm came small moments of reverence, the way sunlight hits the window trim, how tea tastes when you're not gulping it, the way a single word spoken softly can land more deeply than a dozen rushed ones. Her doctor once said, "Your joints are slowing to protect you, not failing, responding." There's something sacred in that the body, even in its wear, still knows how to take care of you if you let it. So now, she lets herself take longer to do things that once felt forgettable, like the ritual of folding laundry slowly, the warmth of towels against her skin, the careful way her fingers smooth fabric into shape. The world may move fast, but her life doesn't have to match it. Sometimes going slower isn't falling behind. It's finally walking in time with your own breath. 2. The people you lose don't really leave you. Harold still sets 2 mugs out every morning, one for him, one for Rose. It's not habit, it's conversation. He doesn't speak aloud, but his hands remember where her mug used to sit, the way she liked the steam, not too hot, the pause she'd take before her first sip. She's been gone 3 winters now, and yet she hasn't gone anywhere. He sees her in the way the light moves through the curtain. In the rustle of the newspaper, she used to pretend to read while really just listening to him ramble. In the leftover cinnamon, he still sprinkles, because life needs a little sweet. They say grief is a season, but for Harold, it's more like weather. It changes, it visits. It doesn't ask permission, but it no longer storms. Scientists will tell you that the brain keeps emotional imprints long after names, dates, and even faces fade. That we remember love not as data, but as warmth, a shape in the chest, a shift in the air, and sometimes that's enough. So Harold lets her stay, not in photos, but in presence. In the empty chair he still dusts every Sunday. In the music he plays low while cooking, because she loved a good melody with her onions. It's not moving on, it's moving with. Grief doesn't mean forgetting, it means folding them into the new rhythm, the one you never asked for but somehow learned to dance with. He no longer asks why she's gone. He only asks how he might carry her into what's left. And every morning, the mug waits, not for tea, but for remembering. 3. The body is not betraying you. It's communicating. Marion used to wake with a start, alarm blaring, legs swinging to the floor, already halfway to the next task. But now, mornings arrive slower, and her knees speak first, a soft stiffness. Not pain, just presence. A reminder that her body is still here, still holding, still bearing weight after all these years. For a while, she cursed it. The creak in her wrist, the ache in her back after a short walk, the way her balance sometimes whispered before her mind did. She thought it meant failure, that she'd somehow done aging wrong. But then, a nurse she trusted said something that changed everything. Your body's not giving out. It's giving you feedback." Marion didn't answer, but the words stayed. That night she sat quietly, feet bare on the rug, and listened. Not for sounds, but for signals. She noticed the tension in her jaw after a call with her son, the flutter in her chest before doctor's visits, the warmth in her palms when she watched birds gather at the feeder. And she began to realize the body speaks long before it shouts. Now, before she stands, she touches her knees, not to brace, to thank. She moves slower, not from defeat, but from conversation. A call and response between the heart and the bones that still carry it. Science has a name for it: interoception, the ability to sense your inner world. But she just calls it finally listening. The betrayal she once felt was never from her body. It was from the expectation that it would always be silent. Now, with every step, every ache, every ease, she whispers back, "I hear you." And somehow, that's all it ever wanted. 4. Loneliness isn't just a feeling, it's a message. Dorothy didn't remember when the house became so quiet. It wasn't sudden, just a slow dimming. One phone call fewer, one invitation lost in the mail, one silence stretching longer than it used to. She told herself it was fine. She had books, the kettle, a garden that didn't ask questions. But one evening, as she stirred soup at dusk, she noticed her own hum, soft, automatic, like a child singing to herself in an empty room. She hadn't realized she was filling the silence with fragments of her own presence. Loneliness isn't loud. It doesn't knock. It slips in through routine, sits at the table, eats with you, then stays. At first, she thought missing people was weakness, but the ache wasn't about others. It was her body's way of saying, "You still want to be seen." Science calls it a biological need. That isolation can affect memory, heart rhythms, even longevity. But Dorothy didn't read that in a journal. She read it in the way her hand lingered on the cold chair across from hers. So, she made a change, not big. She turned on the kitchen light before every meal, even if the sun hadn't set. She set the table for 2, not because someone was coming, but because she needed to remember that presence begins with invitation. Some nights, she would speak aloud. To her late husband, to herself, to no one. It didn't matter. The sound of her own voice was enough to stir the air. And with time, she noticed the ache didn't leave, but softened. Loneliness, she learned, wasn't asking her to escape. It was asking her to return, to light, to gesture, to even the smallest act of connection with the world she still belonged to. 5. It's not too late to become softer. Elaine had always been the strong one, the one who fixed the broken cabinet, paid bills before they arrived, held her tongue when it trembled to speak. Strength was how she survived, how she kept the walls standing when everyone else was learning to lean. But lately, her hands trembled not with rage, not even with fear, but with tiredness. Not the kind that sleep fixes, the kind that builds after years of never crying when you needed to. One morning, she sat by her window and watched the wind bend the branches without breaking them. And she thought, what if that's strength too? What if softness isn't surrender, but return? She didn't tell anyone, just started moving differently. Spoke slower, didn't fill every silence. Let her tears come when they visited, didn't explain them, didn't hide them. She no longer needed to hold every moment together. She could let some fall and trust they'd land safely. It wasn't easy, the armor was familiar. It had saved her once, but now it was just heavy. And so, she made a ritual. Simple. Each morning, she placed a hand over her chest and whispered to no one, "I'm still here." Not a declaration, a reconciliation. With the girl she once was, so eager to be unbreakable. With the woman she had become, tender despite it all. Her doctor once said, "The heart becomes more reactive with age." As if it were a warning, Elaine took it as permission to feel more, to forgive herself faster, to open instead of defend. She is not soft because she is fading. She is soft because she is finally allowed to be. And in that softness, she found not weakness, but peace. There are versions of ourselves we built like shelters, stubborn, sharp, always prepared, always apologizing for needing nothing. They were necessary once, born from heartbreak, shaped by betrayal, held up by the need to be strong when no one else was watching. But now, they don't fit anymore. The woman who once laughed too loud to hide the silence. The man who always stood even when his knees begged for mercy. The one who smiled through funerals, through disappointment, through nights of being the last one, awake in a house full of sleep. They carried you here. And they did so with love, even if it was a love that sometimes hurt. But you are not them anymore. And it's okay to lay them down, to whisper, "I don't need you like I once did." To mourn not their passing, but the effort it took to keep them alive. It's not a loss, it's a remembering. That underneath all that defense was someone still tender, still hoping, still wanting to be held without armor. We think grief is for people, but it's also for selves, for the pieces we shed so we can become a little lighter. So, tonight before sleep finds you, place your hand over your chest, not in regret, but in reverence. Say thank you to the part of you that got you through. Say goodbye if you're ready, or just sit and listen. Even endings can be gentle, especially when they are earned. It didn't happen in a single moment, not in a sunrise, not in a conversation, not in some revelation that shouted. It came in fragments, like breath-warming cold fingers, like soil remembering spring even in January. It came the day Helen stopped apologizing for taking too long at the checkout line. The day George let his daughter guide him by the elbow and didn't pull away. The day Mira cried during a rerun of a show she'd seen 100 times and didn't wipe the tear away too fast. And in those small, unseen places, they each felt it. Not weakness, not failure, but a return to something that had always been there. Soft, strong, quiet. They realized that it takes more courage to feel than to numb. To stay when your instinct is to retreat. To say, "I'm scared," not with a whisper of defeat, but with a voice that knows fear and moves anyway. That's the strength no one applauds, the kind that doesn't need to be seen to be real. Their backs might have bent, but their hearts stood taller. Their steps may have slowed, but their presence deepened. The world tells us to harden, to brace, to protect. But maybe real protection isn't building higher walls. It's letting yourself be touched and trusting you'll survive it. They were never fragile, only layered, only tired, only waiting for permission to stop bracing and begin breathing again. And when they did, the world didn't fall apart. It softened with them. If life feels different now, it's not because something broke. It's because something opened. A space between noise and knowing, between expectation and essence, between who you were asked to be and who you quietly are. And maybe, just maybe, this is not the end of the road, but the beginning of walking it with bare feet, soft palms, no armor. The truths no one told you were never secrets. They were waiting, patiently, until you were still enough to hear them. That you are not behind. That slowing down is not a fading, but a deepening. That grief is not a shadow to run from, but a doorway to remembering. That the body, even in its wear, is not betraying you. It's whispering, "I'm still here." That loneliness, aching and invisible, is not proof of emptiness, but evidence that your heart still wants to be met. And that softness at this age is not a luxury, but a return. A homecoming to all that was left untouched while you were busy surviving. So tonight, light a lamp in your chest, let it flicker gently. Not to announce anything, not to perform, just to glow because it can. You're not done becoming. You're not late. You're not too much or not enough. You are exactly what this season of your life has been waiting for. And if you ever forget, we'll be here. Not ahead, not behind, beside you, always.